diatomaceous earth. Diatoms are little creatures that live in water. Some of them are marine, some of them are freshwater. They form what we call an exoskeleton that's made out of silica. And many of the marine forms, especially these little skeletons, are very sharp from a microscopic standpoint. I mean, to you they feel like talcum powder. To an insect it feels like a razor blade. And diatomaceous earth does a number of different things. Insects that have a hard outer shell and exoskeleton, you dust them with natural DE, it gets down in their joints, it starts cutting, and the insect dehydrates and dies. The DE that you use in your swimming pool filter is totally different from natural DE. The DE you use in your swimming pool filter is dangerous to people. It has been heat treated and it's turned to a crystalline form, which would be very bad for you if you breathe it. Plus, it's taking away the sharp edges, so it doesn't do anything to the insects. If you use DE, diatomaceous earth, at all, you only use the natural form. It's actually being put in a lot of animal feeds these days, and it seems to take care of internal parasites in the gut of the animal, be they roundworms, tapeworms, the type of roundworm they call hookworms. Animals can have a lot of nasty stuff. If anybody took freshman biology, probably dissected ascaris, I think that's what it is, the worms that are inside of horses' intestines and things like that. And they found that if they mix a little bit of DE in the food, it would take care of these internal parasites. And they thought, well, how can that be? Because these parasites don't have exoskeletons or joints to get in there and cut. Well, it turns out that they work a different way against these particular internal parasites, and that is that they are highly irritating to the intestinal lining, which then produces a mucus material, which then sloughs out and carries all the parasites out with it. So DE is used for a number of things. You can rub it in the fur on your pets, and it's a natural flea killer.
What is the substitute for pools that you don't want to use?
You get natural DE. You just get it from a nursery or somewhere. It does a much better job. Patrick didn't bring any DE out.
What's DE stand for?
Diatomaceous earth. Diatoms, there are areas where, millions of generations of diatoms have lived and died. Their little exoskeletons build up in layers several feet deep, both in aquatic and marine things. What's that?
Use diatoms in toothpaste.
Yeah, it's highly abrasive. You're just scouring your teeth with little bodies of diatoms, so to speak.
How does that compare to the nematodes?
Totally different. I mean, with hard-shelled insects, it's cutting and dehydrating. Beneficial nematodes actually penetrate the body of the host and destroy it through, in effect, parasitic infection.
All that kind of bad bugs, ticks, and all that, right?
Well, nematodes, or nematoids, so you'll say, no, nematodes, there are over 500,000 different kinds of nematodes at last count. A few of them are bad for people, a few of them are bad for animals, a few of them are very bad for insects. Most of them don't seem to have any effect one way or the other. The ones that we call beneficial nematodes are the ones that don't hurt animals or plants, but are very bad for insects. Among the things that nematodes will parasitize and kill are grubworms, ants, fleas, ticks, the larval stage of thrips, but all these things have to be down in the ground because these little guys live in the soil. Once you get them up out of the soil and let them dehydrate, they're gone. But in the soil, they will take care of wireworms and virtually every other damaging insect that exists in the soil. If you have tick problems, now is the only time of year that the ticks are down at soil level to where these guys can get after them. The thrips insect that does so much damage to flowers like roses and gardenias and things like that, this is the time of year that their larval state is in the soil. And these things, if you use them properly, will control thrips. Grubworms? No, there are not many grubworms out there. Grubworms are the larval state of June bugs. Watch your porch light. If you've had grubworm damage, when you start seeing June bugs around your porch light, that means they're about to go out and lay eggs in your yard and you're about to have grubworms. When you see June bugs, spray these guys out to control the grubworms. So, are they used year-round? Yes, they are used year-round, but for different purposes. If your problem is grubworms, don't waste your time buying these things right now. If your problem is ticks, Don't waste your time buying these things in the summer because they're not going to do any good. Buy them and put them out right now. Everybody always says, how long do they last when you put them out? The individual nematode, and there are a million of them on this little blue sponge. Donna counted them this morning early. Still there. The individual nematode lives 60 to 90 days. And if they do not find an insect host to reproduce in, then they're dead and gone after 60 to 90 days. But two of these little guys get together inside of a grub worm, and they can have 100,000 babies in 2 weeks' time. So as long as you've got insects out there for these things to continue to reproduce, you're going to have a lot of these things out in the soil. Are they out there naturally? Yes, these things are in your soil. Right now, you got these things out in your lawn, in your garden, as long as you're not using weed killer and chemical fertilizers. These things are out in your yard right now. There might be one of these guys for every 5 square feet. Is that enough to control a flea infestation? No. Is that enough to control a grubworm infestation? No. When you put these things out at the recommended rate, this is 1 million nematodes. It covers 2,000 to 3,000 square feet. I calculated it out one time. I think you're then putting out something like 400 nematodes per square foot. That's enough to take care of an insect problem. So if you're just after grubworms, probably one application is all you'll ever have to do. If you have a big flea outbreak, you put these things out, you kill them all out. Doesn't mean that 6 months from now, squirrels, neighborhood dogs, whatever, might not bring in a whole new crop of fleas, and you might need to put out some more. So I can't tell you exactly how often you will have to do it. I can tell you my personal experience when we really first started using these things. I mean, I grew up with my grandfather. When we had fleas, we sprayed malathion. If we killed 95% of them, we thought we were doing really well. I had a bad flea outbreak at my ranch, so bad one of my little kitties got flea anemia just from blood loss from all the fleas. But she came through fine, thank goodness. But I put the beneficial nematodes out, middle of the summer, worst possible time, put them out, watered them in. In a week's time, I couldn't find a flea. It's been 4 years, and I've hardly seen a flea since then. I know I didn't see even one flea, probably for 2.5 years after I put them out. They really work. I wasn't killing 95% of the fleas. I was killing 100% of the fleas. So these guys do work. Yes, sir.
On the DE, dogs like to sniff and root around in the yard.
Huh?
Is there any risk of them inhaling that?
If you're using natural DE, no, because it's not crystalline, and it's not going to cause any problems if it gets, into their respiratory tract. If you're using swimming pool DE, big problem.
And what are those problems again if you're using swimming pool, did you say?
White lung disease, silicosis, you don't want to be doing that. But natural DE is not a concern because it's not a crystalline form. Yes, sir.
If you want to get rid of the DE in your full filter now, the bad stuff, how do you dispose of it?
Put it in the trash. Put it in the landfill. If you're not breathing it, it's not bad stuff.
And the beneficial nematodes, do they work against those worms that pop out in the spring from your oaks?
No. No, because those worms do not have a larval stage in the soil. Those are, the adult is a moth that lays the egg in the tree that makes the caterpillar that forms a cocoon that makes the new moth. Okay, we're talking about the little caterpillars that are called gallworms, leaf rollers, lots of different things. The eggs are up there in the trees now. When the weather's right, if the weather's right, they're going to hatch, and you're going to get these little caterpillars that hang down on threads. I've seen times in the hill country that they just totally defoliated the oak trees. We never really seem to know what's going to be a bad year for those caterpillars and what isn't going to be. There is a little tiny wasp that parasitizes the egg, that lays its egg inside of the moth egg, that then eats out the moth egg, turns into a little wasp, and flies off. So you get no caterpillar, and you get this little tiny wasp. The wasp is called a trichoderma. No, trichogramma. Trichoderma is the fungus on cornmeal. Trichogramma is this little wasp. And you can release these little wasps out where you think you may have worm problems. Each one of these little strips right here has like 6,500 little moth eggs, each of which has little developing wasp larvae in it. You take this, you pin it to the tree,